This is David Seymour. He is a French-Canadian politician that's recently moved to New Zealand. And he wants to educate us about lots of things in this first part. That New Zealand traffics in envy. That's one of the things. And I think there's so many times that Seymour gets it so close, but he doesn't quite get it. Like when he talks about all those people paying tax, and he's so close, but he's talking about the top 3%, not the bottom 97%. So he's close. He's close. So let's have a listen to Mr. Seymour talking about how New Zealand traffics in envy and other bits and bobs on Chris Lynch's show. This was in the weekend.
In today's speech, you said our opponents traffic in the idealisation of envy. What do you mean by that?
Well, I love this country, but it's always had a dark underbelly, which is our tall poppy syndrome.
I agree it's a dark underbelly. I don't think it's a tall poppy syndrome, Mr. Seymour. I think there's much that is darker and more underbelly-ish than... Well, New Zealand does have a tall poppy syndrome, but I don't think that's the thing that enables vulnerable people to turn their lights on or off at night time. I don't think that's what it is.
And it's also true that politicians around the world can do a huge amount of, I guess, electioneering and vote winning, basically by promising other people's money. You find 10 people, you take their money and give it to 100 people, and you end up winning the election.
I always find it hilarious, Chewie, when politicians talk about, oh, they're just trying to buy votes. And you're like, yep, that's what all politicians do. You know, they do things like there will be a COVID inquiry if we get in. And people go, oh, okay, because I want that. You're buying their votes. Winston Peters, for some reason, goes, we're going to have a penis policeman in every single bathroom. And there are some people out there that will buy their vote. But they always seem to have an issue talking about how the other side buys their votes. Why don't we all be honest and say this is called politics? Sometimes it will be financial. I mean, this government bought votes by talking about refitting out Dunedin's hospital, by talking about tax cuts. So this government has taken money to offer back to other people to buy votes. And I just wrote this down. Here's my question, Mr. Seymour, because he won't come on. So imagine you've got 10 people, and those 10 people earn $100, and out of that $100, they get taxed $10. Okay, cool. And then you've got 2 people, and they make $1,000, and out of that $1,000, they get taxed $100. That means the first group of people have been taxed 10%. The second group of people have been taxed 1%, but the second group of people, which is only 2 people, have put twice as much in tax money into the coffers. But who do you think is going to be impacted more? The ones with $90 left or the ones with $900 left? The ones with $900 have put more into the system. They've put less in proportionally, it's only 1%. And the ones who have put more proportionally in, but less actual value, have only got $90 left out of their 100. Who is it going to impact more? To me, that's the question I want to see asked, Chewie, and just see what Mr. Seymour says. Who do you think is going to be impacted more? Because the word fair, F-A-I-R, can be used many ways. Is it fair that the people with more money might put more into the coffers, even though it's less proportionally? Or is it fair? Is it fair that they would be asked to put more in? Is it fair that the ones at the bottom who put more in proportionally but less to the total are then left worse off? What's the fair outcome here? Chewie?
I like people like David Seymour because they're simple souls. Because they're always talking about how asking people that are doing well to do more is this politics of envy.
Yeah.
And when anybody talks about any sort of socialist program, like maybe if everybody contributed to healthcare, we could buy a hospital every now and then. It's always very specific things that he has a problem with, not looking at the fact that roads are a socialist program when you look at them that way. He'll be the first to say that communism doesn't work in theory, but neither does libertarianism. Neither does this fucking bananas world that he thinks where all tax is theft and everybody should just build a compound and live by themselves, fearful of the unwashed masses gathering outside their gates. That is something that has happened. You know, fucking heads on pikes if it gets out of control. So, I mean, this is. I also have to point out the fact that this is our deputy prime minister now, which is fucking terrifying. He had a gathering in the weekend, a celebratory, masturbatory, pat on the back breakfast for his inner circle. Now that
that's what Chris is talking about. Chris is talking about the speech. That's the speech from that celebration.
Yeah, it just bananas. Like, who does this? Like, is it something that is happening now, or is it this guy huffing his own farts because he's managed to climb these heady heights, and now he's letting everybody know that anybody that's wronged him is on a list?
Yep. We'll move on. But the other thing I was going to say is, sorry, I'm just being asked if I fear the dog. Yes, I fear the dog. These are the kinds of questions I would like to ask Mr. Seymour. How much do you think would be a fair amount? Like, because I think what happens is we use these words, but actually, and I think I've used this example before when I got a deck built when I was in Auckland, and the guy said, hardwood or softwood? And I was like, oh, well, what's the difference? Oh, hardwood's much more expensive. Oh, well, okay, let's get softwood. So we got softwood, got to the end of the job. It was about a $5,000 or $6,000 job. And that's when he told me it would have been $500 more for hardwood. So without the context of knowing what he considered so much more, like, of course I would have paid 6.5 for hardwood rather than 6 for softwood. So what I want to know is, what are the numbers? So Mr. Seymour, we're talking about being fair. How much is a fair amount of tax to pay? How much would be fair for the millionaire? How much would be fair for the beneficiary or the underworked? You know, the people who are working a part-time job whilst they're still looking for a full-time job. What would be the fair amount? And see what he's got to say.
That often gets left out, doesn't it? This man standing up for the rights of the taxpayer conveniently seems to forget that the beneficiary is a taxpayer. We're all taxpayers. So why is it just that you're talking about a very specific taxpayer?
I mean, you're right. Literally everyone. A tourist is a taxpayer. They buy petrol, they buy goods, and it's GST. Everyone. There would be no one in this country who doesn't contribute to the tax pool. No one.
Everybody understands that there is a downside to cheap, right? It is worth spending more to get a better product, to get a better result, that sort of thing. If you were to turn around and go, well, look, if you're doing this well, we are going to take this from you, but with that, you are going to buy a hospital. You are going to buy better schools. You are going to get cars off the road, whatever. But there's a benefit. But what these guys have been doing since they started their term of government is running everything down. So the next stage for that is to say, see, the taxpayer's getting very poor value. We've done that.
Yeah.
So you don't want to pay any tax. Like, if people in the Scandinavian countries that we always talk about, very high levels of taxation, always mention that they pay a lot of tax. But they're also the happiest societies on earth. They have fantastic public service. They have all of these things that we want. They have a gold-plated education system. They've been able to do all of this because they got together and said, look at all of this stuff. This is how we did it. All of the things, like especially education from this man, all of the things that are too expensive and that we can't possibly do, we have done before. It's not impossible. So why does this mewling little fucking cockslime not get it? Why is it impossible to him?
Well,
like, I'm not going to be nice about this. I saw a comment. Oh, this Chris Lynch guy is a dickhead. I just had a Google. Yes, he is. So David Seymour's got time to go on on whatever this podcast pseudo news show with this guy who's a person that believes in the great replacement theory, but he'll duck our emails. Righto.
All right, well, let's keep going, shall we?
Yeah.
That's why a relatively small minority of New Zealanders pay a vastly disproportionate amount of all tax. It's also why.
Hang on, but that's the exact point. A vastly disproportionate amount. That means they're paying more proportionally. There are a group of people who are paying vastly disproportionate amount of tax, and it's the poor. But they're literally the ones who disproportionately pay, because they're the ones who don't have enough left over at the end of the day to put some in the bank. All of their money gets taxed, all of it. Whereas the wealthy, they have stuff they can put away. They have less proportionally that they pay on tax. So that's just flat out wrong, what Mr. Seymour was saying there.
Amount of all tax. It's also why politicians like to make rules that they put to restrict how you can develop your property, what you can say, who you can do business with, how you can work, how you can be employed.
I'd like to know the who you can do business with thing. I'd like to go, Mr. Seymour, what are you talking about? Where are the restrictions on who we can do business with? Are you talking about, like, for example, 16-year-olds can't buy beer? You can't do business with them? What's the restrictions on who you can do business with? I'm confused about that one.
Anybody worth their salt would have jumped in their boots and all and gone, hang on. Let's go through all of these things you just listed.
Yeah. All right, we'll keep going.
How you can be an employer. There's always benefits, politically at least, for taking away other people's money and other people's freedom to reward your voters.
Again, how much is okay? Where's your line, Mr. I'd like to know literally how much is okay to quote unquote take away, or does this libertarian actually want zero tax? Like, would that be the ideal Shangri-La world? Like, because following the theory of smaller government is better, therefore zero would be the perfect number. Less tax is better. Would zero be the perfect number? I'd like to sit down with someone and figure that out. What's the number are we talking about here? Because there is a natural progression to smaller, or less. When do we stop? When do we go, okay, that's enough? I genuinely would like to know where that line is, because I haven't got a clue, because it's always rhetoric. It's always sort of, you're doing it wrong, it should be less. And then it's nothing else is followed up on.
Do you believe in a progressive tax policy? Or do you believe in flat tax, or do you believe in no tax? Like, for a guy that's obsessed with tax, he should be able to answer that. Whether it actually stacks up in economic theory or not, that's a completely different story. But all of these guys hark back to a world where the wealthy were massively taxed. Not on all of their earnings. This is the thing, I think the thing that they all gloss over is that you're not taxed 90% on everything you make. You're taxed that much over a certain amount. Like, it's the same for all of us. I'm in a different tax bracket than someone that's on the beneficiaries. Most people, when they talk about tax, all come back to the same thing, that we have not touched our tax brackets meaningfully in decades. And now it's the average wage is in a higher tax bracket. It's madness. But nobody's going to have the sensible conversation to sit down to it, because part of that is going to be the rich need to do more.
We're going to hear from Mr. Seymour here, just to the last 40 seconds of this clip, first of all, as to why he wants political power. Right? He talks about why other people want political power, and then he explains why he wants it.
However, that approach in the long term makes us all poorer, because what it really says is, if you're someone who's doing something positive and productive, then politics will come after you. And that's why I try in my career to win political power so that I can not use it the way that others have. I want to win political power so we can uphold a free society under the rule of law, where people can get on with making a difference in their own lives. And
so how is it, and this is the thing, how have we, that's the society we're living in now, so you can retire, because how is that not the society we're living in now?
If there's people who need help,
have we not had that?
Often creating an environment with good economic growth. It's easier to build homes, they're more affordable. Those are the sorts of conditions that will actually help ensure that New Zealand, and any other country for that matter, prospers for everybody.
It's the idea, I've got a couple more clips, the other ones are much shorter. It's the idea of someone kind of going, you know, if only we had this thing, and you're like, yeah, we've got that thing. But if you acknowledge that we got that thing, then you can't stir up the fear, and it's FEAR now, to your base to get them to vote for you. What part of that about people growing up and doing what they want to be, what part of that don't we have today sitting in this country? Like, because like the whole thing, who you can do business with. What are you talking about? Like, I genuinely want to have David Seymour here so I can go, can you please unpack that? What are you talking about? Who you can do business with? Like, there's restrictions on who. How does this work? Explain it to me.
And it's funny when you listen to it. Well, it's not funny. It's fucking infuriating. When he talks in the fact and the way that he's talking about the individual, right? He's not. He's talking about corporations. He's talking about businesses. He's talking. There's too many regulations. They've got to give too many holidays. They've got to make sure that their workers don't get fed into the thresher. And the fact that the government requires you to put handrails around the thresher is costing New Zealand productivity and New Zealand businesses profit. This underlines everything. It shows up in his conversations about the RMA. It comes up with everything around the RSB bill is about giving more power, less restriction to corporations. That's what David Seymour is all about. That's a big chunk of why he's so anti-Māori, because Te Tiriti really reins in the power that big overseas corporations could have.
Yeah.
So let's run down Māori. Let's say that they're a drain on productivity. Let's say that all of this, making sure that we acknowledge the land and we don't pollute and spoil and strip mine and all of that sort of stuff. Let's just blame Māori for that.
Yeah.
Everything he talks about, when you look at that through that lens, it's really fucking clear. It's not individual freedom.
Yeah.
That's a fig leaf for what he's about.
Yeah.
You know, there are people that are out there that want to say horrible things about Māori or Muslims or trans people. And that's just a small fraction of what he's about, that people should be able to say whatever horrible things they want without consequence.
Yeah.
As a society, when have we ever had that?
Yeah.
Never.
We're going to talk later on, and I kind of ummed and ahed about this. Should we do the Chris Bishop at the AMAs? And we are going to talk about it because one of the reasons we're going to talk about it is his reaction, what a load of crap. And look, can I just suggest, and this is just a thought, I don't know if this is for real, although some people have said it is, why aren't we talking about a pissed up minister at a public event? Like, why is that not part of this conversation?
It's a breach of the cabinet manual.
Yeah. But what I was going to say is the whole what a load of crap is indicative of what you're saying, Chewie. It's indicative of this government's attitudes towards Māori altogether. We'll keep our powder dry on that because we are going to talk about it because I think it's important. But before we do, let's just have a look at a couple of messages. Then we're going to go into, because he talked with David Seymour about RNZ, and I think it's quite good to have a conversation around the media today. And this is one of the things we do, commentate on the commentators. Ryjan said, David Seymour becoming deputy was my worst birthday gift ever. Kiwi Bird says, David Smith is referring to doing business with Snapchat. You people are bad. Peter Symes says, I heard David Seymour as an example of the worst person in the world. Arvid says, can't do business with. I think it's his way of saying he can't Snapchat younger and younger people. DS, David Seymour, DPM, Deputy Prime Minister, equals dumb shit doing paid misery. And finally, Arvid says, DS, David Seymour is the, quote, we haven't tried real ideology, end quote, kind. So yes. All right. So let's get to this. Let's get to the second part of the conversation. And there are some more super chats here, which we'll get to later. I'll just bring up the ones that were particularly related to what we just talked about. I can hide you and I can do that. So it's been quite a big day in New Zealand media today, right? NZME had a board shake-up. We all heard the conversations around Jim Grennan, and Jim Grennan was going to be that billionaire Canadian who was going to take it over and become the board chair. He's not. Stephen Joyce. Now, I know people will react badly to Stephen Joyce being a national minister. A lot of the guys in radio who are a bit older today, Stephen Joyce was the owner of 1XX, I think it was, and then was one of the people who started up More FM. So he actually has got radio pedigree, but he's been voted the director and chair of that. So that's happened today. And then also what's happened today is Trade Me has taken a 50% stake in Stuff Digital. Now, I had a bit of a squiz through this article, couldn't quite see it, but I think I read, correct me if I'm wrong, chat, but I think I read that Sinead Boucher bought something for $1, that she just sold half of it for $1 million. I think that's what I read or saw a headline somewhere. I could be wrong with that, but, you know, obviously...
No, that's correct. She bought it for $1.
I know that much, but then sold half of it for $1 million. That's what I'm not 100% sure on. That's a pretty good return. What is it about go woke, go broke? Isn't that supposed to be the situation? David Seymour talking to Chris Lynch about why RNZ hates him, quote unquote. Why do they hate you? And I just wanted to show this a little bit because the number of lies that come out in this about RNZ, and I'll show them to you from the deputy, we won't even say minister anymore, from the deputy prime minister, is shocking. Let me put it out there before we get going. RNZ should not have to or need to check their numbers. They are a public broadcaster, and if you're going to work the public broadcasting system as a clickbait entity needing to get listeners, then it's not a public broadcaster. A public broadcaster should be playing by choice and actually by direction small insignificant things that only are tailored to a small sector of society. Their absolute direction should be about providing back to New Zealand the face that represents New Zealand and not worry about what the ratings are. So I think RNZ's made a mistake with getting involved, and always have, because they shouldn't. They should be having small audience niche ideas, which basically means, because if you're going to go for numbers, then you're never going to say, hey, let's have that niche show on. That's not going to draw numbers, but it's an important voice to hear in community. So I couldn't give a crap about RNZ's numbers. But of course, in this conversation, what we're about to hear is they've just released some of their latest numbers and they're terrible. Now, because they're terrible, because that means they're failing. It's like, well, if you're a niche company providing a very narrow service to a very small number of people, but that was your niche, just because you're small, it doesn't mean you fail. It means you're providing a niche result to a niche audience. Public broadcasting should be like that. Absolutely should be like that. Let's have a listen.
Why does RNZ hate you and the ACT Party?
Well, some of them don't. Actually, I have a good relationship with the gallery. Morning Report, they've got their own problems, and just look at their ratings in freefall, have been for years. I think they've recently gone a bit nuts over the school lunches. They did about 100 stories, and yet, now the problems are all solved. The scheme is being...
You might have missed what he just said. Apparently school lunches are solved. So keep an eye on that one, because he's just said now that it's solved. We'll see.
Enjoyed by the students, saving 50% off the cost to the taxpayer, $130 million saving this year, $170 million next year. But I think part of the problem is Radio New Zealand doesn't like reporting anything positive. So, because we've got a good news story now, we're off their radar.
Radio New Zealand ratings have dropped significantly. Its funding has been cut, and ACT has been celebrating its decline, I see on Twitter. Why?
That's a good question.
Well, it's pretty simple. Everyone else in the media has had to downsize, become more efficient, far more...
Everyone else in the public media is what should be compared to, right? They're not a commercial radio station. Their mandate shouldn't be to get the most ears possible. Their mandate should be telling New Zealand stories. That's why I had the big spiel at the front about their numbers shouldn't matter.
Pretty simple. Everyone else in the media has had to downsize, become more efficient, file more stories per day, and really think hard about how they satisfy their audience. In the last 5 years, RNZ's gone from 280 full-time equivalents to 316. So if you do the maths on that, they've actually had about a 12.5% increase in staff. Don't quote me on that maths, but it's around about that. they're living in la la land. And I think a bit of pressure to actually do good journalism, satisfy the audience, might be good. And hopefully the rest of the organisation can become as professional as their press gallery team.
What I've noticed that RNZ does shut down comments on their social media pages on stories about Te Pāti Māori and Jacinda Ardern, but
look, I don't know whether I agree or disagree with that policy overall, but I wonder why. Because RNZ doesn't want a bunch of tinfoil hat conspiracy theorists blasting the C word at a former prime minister all over their sites, or a bunch of racists on the other one. Yeah, that's why they should just let racism flow. You know, like, I mean, we don't block any messages through to us. Sometimes YouTube does, but we never actively do it. But it's like, I mean, like I said, I don't know if I'd be turning them off, but you can understand why. You can understand why.
Is he going to mention the Herald shutting down comments on their stories?
Doubted, very, very much. Doubted. But we'll keep going.
Okay.
Throws the gates wide open when it comes to the current government under fire. Therefore, is RNZ actually serving the public, or is it protecting its ideological allies?
Well, I hadn't noticed that trend in their comment moderation, and they may have their own reason for doing that. But look, ultimately, they have a real problem that their ratings and their trust are in freefall. They can point out that...
And why is that, Mr. Seymour? Why is media around the world trust in freefall? Because, I mean, if you're having this conversation, honestly, you'd say it's one of two reasons, either because they're untrustworthy or because a group of people have painted a narrative that they're untrustworthy when they're not. I would submit option 2 to you, Mr. Seymour. And we saw it starting with Trump, and we've seen it gone through the rest of the world, especially because groups like ACT or New Zealand First have used that model to basically be able to go, they can't criticise us because they're woke. They can't criticize us because you can't trust media. You know, and that's really all it is a sector of society has gone, they've laid enough bullshit foundation that these places being untrustworthy, so they can now go, well, you can't trust them. You know, it's exactly what they've done. I mean, I would challenge any politician or any group that said that not to go to the public and say, who do you trust? But go to the articles and go to the actual media outlets and test what they're saying, whether it's trustworthy or not. That would be a piece of research worth doing, because people can be idiots, people can be fooled, people can be wrong. If you actually check the media outlets and check if their stories are accurate or inaccurate, that would be the way to figure it out. But who's done that? Like, no one, Chewie? Maybe a couple of people in America?
I mean, this is just David Seymour taking an axe to another publicly funded institution.
Yeah.
Like, to weaken it, to raise questions about its integrity, to raise questions about its value to the country. The Radio New Zealand mandate is not a commercial mandate. It never has been. It's been
and it shouldn't be.
Benefit of all New Zealanders.
Yeah.
And that's it. It's to tell New Zealand stories. And that's it. And it's amazing what frees up when you're not worried about some sort of commercial, you know, aspiration, clicks and that sort of thing. Personally, I think Radio New Zealand shouldn't have comment sections. I think all news stories shouldn't have comment sections. You know, when we had newspapers, and
what are they?
Read a story and
what's a newspaper?
Format your own decision without having the hand-scrawled ramblings of crazy people underneath every story. God, they were simple times. But this is the thing, like, Radio New Zealand's mandate far exceeds whatever we spend on it. There's amazing documentary and archival stuff that Radio New Zealand have done. They have a role to play in a national emergency. All of these sort of things that you might sort of go to a commercial operation, hey, you've got to do some of the heavy lifting on this as well. But it's always going to be a secondary thing. But who benefits if Radio New Zealand goes away? Who benefits if we have less media investigating politicians or corporations, business operations, things going on outside of your area of perception? Who benefits? Well, certainly some of the shady fucks that want to fund ACT So this is greeted by my immediate suspicion.
Yeah.
I'm
Right.
also going to note the way that this Chris Lynch guy has framed that question. He's definitely flying the flag for an unbiased, independent media, isn't he? May as well have just set that question up on a T-ball stand for David there.
I mean, I suspect people who are fans, supporters of a different political ideology to us will say exactly the same things when we interview Marama. You know, it's like, I don't know Chris personally, but he was at ZB when I was at ZB. I've had plenty of cordial conversations with him. What I hear is someone with a political ideology, like we have a political ideology that comes out in this broadcasting. You should have seen some of the comments we got when we had the Te Pāti Māori leaders in. Oh, you never asked about child abuse? It's like, no, it's not a subject matter we wanted to talk about. It's other things to talk about.
Te Pāti Māori.
But that's what I'm saying. What I'm saying is what some of you guys are seeing in this interview is what the opposing view to us saw in our interview. So like it's all a wash to me, to be honest. I'm more interested in what the politicians say than what the interviewer says, because that's the politician is the person that we hold accountable. The media interviewer, not so much. That's what I think.
I think I'm just connecting the dots here for the shows that this guy's willing to go on.
Yeah, of course.
Platform.
Of
this
course.
guy, you know, and it's just, you know.
Yeah, but hang on. But Chewie, just to be fair, the Greens don't go on the platform, but they'll come on here. Look, that's what I'm saying. I don't really care about that conversation because I get it. All I care about is the information coming out of the politician's mouth to critique. You know, Labour don't go on the platform, but they come on here.
Yes, they do.
It's a wash.
Yes, they do.
Okay, maybe, but not very much. I mean, I've had conversations with some Labour people behind the scenes about what they will and won't go on. So look, all I'm saying is that the other side say exactly the same thing about Marama coming on here versus the platform. I'm not giving them a defence. I'm just going. That's all. It's like that's. What does Marama say? What does David say? That's what I'm looking at.
I think what I'm trying to point out here in my own clumsy, ham-fisted way, is as our mainstream media outlets fracture and dissolve.
Yeah.
And Radio New Zealand gets torn down and that sort of thing. And we end up with people like us, like Chris Lynch, like the platform, like Reality Check Radio. We are going to have pet politicians talking to their pet constituents about their pet projects on their pet platforms. Yeah. And we're all going to be worse off for it.
Yeah, I agree with you.
All of us.
I agree. And that's why we'll keep asking. We'll keep asking. Look, this has got a couple of minutes to go, this clip, and we hasn't got to the bit we're going to fact check yet either. Let's keep going.
But other media face the similar challenges. That may be true, but the whole point of the government owning them is they're supposed to be different. And
I want to make this quite clear. Yeah.
But hang on, David. If they're supposed to be different, why are you fucking comparing them to a commercial entity? Because they're different.
I want to make this quite clear. You're not suggesting that RNZ needs to give you perhaps favourable coverage. You're suggesting more balance, right?
Well, I'm not suggesting anything other than everyone else has had a huge.
I'm just asking questions, Chewie. I'm not suggesting anything. I'm just asking questions.
Squeeze. I try and work with them as well as I can, but we've cut their budget because they clearly need to get the same message the rest of the media has been getting. Their trust and their ratings are in free fall, and we're not going to keep giving them taxpayers' money when they're not delivering.
See, that's an interesting point now. David Seymour just said we're not going to keep giving RNZ money when they're in free fall. He's literally saying if they don't become a commercial entity, we won't fund them. If they don't get more listeners, we won't fund them. Now, he's got no power to do that, but this is the Deputy Prime Minister talking about a public broadcaster and saying, well, they need more listeners or we're going to get rid of them. Just bookmark that one.
I actually spoke to former Labour Minister Stuart Nash on Friday, and we both agree that the whole kind of notion of this gotcha journalism belongs perhaps to a bygone era of the late 90s when television ruled the media landscape, and I think the world's moved on and people are wanting just
a little side note here. When he spoke to the minister on Friday, it was here on Free Speech Fridays on the platform. So that was when he spoke to him, which he's entitled to do, but that was where he spoke to him.
Yeah, I know. I just wonder when he's going to be a New Zealand First MP rather than an ex-Labour MP.
Lots of questions. It kind of feels like RNZ, and this is what he said, is sort of stuck in the past in an outdated mode of journalism where gotcha reigns supreme. Do you agree with that kind of sentiment?
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. I got interviewed by Guy on Espina, and I use Guy as an example because he's someone I do actually have a bit of time for. But, he's interviewing me on this 30-minute uncensored concept he's got. He's lucky to get 8,000 views on YouTube.
He's lucky to get 8,000 views. That means they're pretty much all under 8,000 views. He's lucky to get 8,000 views. We've got to listen real careful, Deputy Prime Minister.
The concept he's got. He's lucky to get 8,000 views on YouTube with that show. We get 20 or 30,000 just from me walking across the bridge in Parliament getting interviewed for journalists. It cost us nothing to make, and we whip it up there in 10 minutes. That's the difference, right? Now, but you think about it, this is a guy who was a really big deal. I mean, he was on TVNZ News at 6 o'clock talking to 500,000 people. He was on Morning Report talking to 500,000 people. Now he's lucky to get 8,000. And I actually think he's a pretty decent guy, but it just shows actually what he's been doing hasn't been that good all along. The way he tried to interview me.
So what he's doing now means he's never been good. That's what Seymour just said.
He wasn't that good, but hey, look, maybe it'll make for some entertainment. I think it shows that people now have more choice. And in a way, what's happened with the media is not that it's got worse. It's kept doing what it's always doing. Just a whole lot of people have just decided to go elsewhere. So
we're going to have a look at this. Lucky to get 8,000. So here's 30 with Guy and Espina. Last episode, 103,000. 23,000. This clip's only had 600 views, 1,600 views, 10,000, 2,500, 7,400, 103,000, 8,000, 22,000. Scroll down, 14,000, 20,000. So it's factually incorrect. So David Seymour is lying about RNZ. So that's factually incorrect.
A deputy prime minister is telling a bald-faced lie about a publicly funded news information show that didn't treat him well enough. Is that the
but remember the second part of his conversation. Oh, we do a video and slap it up, 20 to 30,000 views. Okay.
Oh, yes. Yeah, okay.
5,000, 3,000, 7,000, 4,500.
Oh, he's got his numbers mixed up. That's
13,000, 15,000, 19,000. There's one that's 20 to 30,000. 13,000, 2,500, 13,000, 43,000, that's above. 9,000, 8,000, 938, 14,000. You get my point. My point is he says RNZ needs to compete like we do. Look at this example of a show that gets very few viewers. We just proved that to not be accurate to what he said. When we get so many more, we just proved that not to be accurate as to what he said. So I don't know whether Seymour is actively knowing that he's lying, because he might just be pulling numbers out of his ass because he's in an interview. Or he is actually knows exactly what he's doing. He wants to defund RNZ, and this is a part of his tactic to get it done. Chewie.
All of that, I don't know if it's just a politician talk about ratings. It seemed very Trumpian there. I wonder if he's so focused on numbers. I wonder how Mihi's wee documentary on him.
Well, while you're looking that up, let me just say as well, because we were talking about Hipkins. Looks like he has been on the platform a few times. Not for over a year though. Like there's 2 years ago. We went on 2 years ago. And then 2 years ago, it would seem, a year ago. And just so you know, for YouTube, basically what happens is you get 6 months, 7 months, 8 months, 10 months, 1 year. And then I don't think it clicks over again until 2 years. So if it says 1 year ago, it might be 1 year and 10 months. So they don't go on a lot. And then maybe there's a new policy at the moment. I don't know. But the point I was making during that little conversation was everyone in public has a bias or a perspective towards the media outlets they like, and they have venom towards the people that refuse to go on them. That's why I say to you very clearly, I never feel entitled to someone's time, ever. Anyone, even people who do come on, we're not entitled to their time. They're entitled to make whatever decision they want. But I also know in this game, our supporters will go, bah, he won't even come on. Whereas Plunkett supporters will go, bah, Marimo won't even come on. You know, it's a wash.
Yeah, but we're better people.
maybe. So anyway, so there's the that's a good chunk of the conversation around that. It's pretty dystopian what he's talking about with RNZ. If they basically him saying, well, actually literally him saying, without quoting him, I would like to remove funding from them if their numbers don't grow. That's a pretty scary thing for a deputy prime minister to say. And who else has said that in the media in the last couple of days? No one's picked up on that.
It's also our second deputy prime minister to say similar things about
true.
Radio New Zealand funding, right?
True.
Mihi's documentary into David Seymour and the ACT Party, 64,000 views in 14 days.
That's barely 8,000 though, Chewie. 64,000 is barely 8,000, eh? Just so I'm clear. Look, can I say this as well? I'll say this as well. I think I saw it on Newsroom. Newsroom did like a diary of what's old mate who does the new NZME, New Zealand Herald live show, AM show, Bridges.
Ryan Bridge.
Ryan. Newsroom did like the diary of Ryan Bridge, and they started off by going pretending it was his diary on the first day of that new show. Our 17 viewers. I think picking out numbers is really silly and really dangerous, because so if you're going, well, this is not worth watching, it's only got 17 viewers, when they've got 17,000 live viewers, then you look like a goose. We have had people who have actively looked at what we've done back in the day with a show that's had a couple of hundred views, highlight it, laugh at it, go, and now we're much bigger than some of these places and people that did that. I don't ever think that we should talk down numbers. You know, people on a social media that have got 107 followers, I never tend to go, oh, you go talk to your 107 followers, because in 10 weeks they might be 500,000 followers. You know, it's just, I just don't think that's a winning a winning word structure for conversation. You know, a winning tactic.
Certainly not a good angle to play for the leader of a political party who got 8%.